Up next is Cynthia Kraack, doing speculative fiction. Cynthia's The High Cost of Flowers won 2 Midwest Book Awards, taking first in literary fiction and contemporary fiction. Her debut work, Minnesota Cold, won the 2009 Northeastern Minnesota Book Award for fiction. She also wrote the Ashwood Trilogy, a speculative fiction family saga. Recently, she co-edited Boundaries Without, the 2017 Calumet edition of speculative fiction. Glimmer Train, Big Money Literary Journal, and Hal Prize competitions have recognized her short stories. Please put your hands together for Cynthia Kraack.
All of that, and don't quit your day job, right? By the way, Terry mentioned his short story, Trouble at 40,000 Feet. Yeah. And I do have the Calumet anthology that Terry's story's in, so if you're interested. I decided to read for my first book, which is Minnesota Cold, published in 2009. I started writing it in the 1990s, and at that time, 2015, 2025, 2035 sounded very far away. Not so true. And it actually started as kind of a love story, and then I saw this news thing about middle-class families trying to stay alive in Kosovo after the war. And it just like freaked me out about how would we deal? You know, if you lived in a high-rise, how would you cook food and do all that kind of stuff? So these are the kind of things speculative fiction writers do. So it's the story of Sally Dodge, who at the time that the story starts is in her 70s and is telling the story. She was in her 50s at the time of the crisis. And I'll read a little bit from chapter 2 for it. I hope it's not too scary, just kind of hit me as being symbolic of our times. I am pragmatic. When life was normal, reading books about the Armageddon or some other post-apocalyptic nonsense felt like a waste of time. You know, I can't remember one thing from those books that would have made 2015 easier to bear. Before the global crisis, I lived each day, assuming my life had meaning and people around the world wanted to live in peace. After the crisis, my life became focused on survival. We tumbled down Maslow's hierarchy to the basics of food, water, warmth, and safety very quickly. Life played a giant joke on those of us living 20 years ago. When the men who played with power ordered those who played with destruction to send out their weapons, billions suffered. Our family lived underground for a year, not knowing if friends 10 miles away lived or had died, never having enough to eat, nearly losing the ability to dream about a future. But that was the price we paid for living ignorantly in a careless global society. One group acted in anger halfway around the world, and the lives of mothers, fathers, and children everywhere crumbled. To understand what was wrong with the Minnesota Territory in 2035, one needed to be of a certain age when the crisis occurred. Politicians in 2015 had been chosen on promises reflective of the era: saving Minnesota jobs, providing universal health care, improving public education. They were solid career politicians schooled in the practices of soundbite rhetoric and public image. Most believed in the Minnesota tradition of compromise as a virtue. And as a group, they proved to be completely inadequate when faced with the immediate problems of a post-nuclear world. Without communication systems or dependable energy supplies, all service delivery ceased. We had had a precious few days to prepare for the nuclear debris cloud, then the blackout. In retrospect, our preparations were as futile as sandbags when the Mississippi crested above flood levels. Light bulbs lasted longer than batteries. It was impossible to stockpile enough clean water. There wasn't wood. There wasn't wood available to keep a family warm through 9 months of winter. The politicians sat in special session those first weeks, engaged in heartfelt debate on how to mount an emergency response. Democrats stood on their historical principles, Republicans protected their conservative traditions. They went on record for all the noblest causes, pledging equal access to rapidly disappearing resources. In our basement, the temperatures dropped. We no longer waited for leadership. The winter did not end in April of 2016. Grimy, contaminated snow remained on the ground early in July. We were always cold, usually hungry. I cooked a giant pot of oatmeal for our meals over a fire every morning. Our common eating disorder was a lack of food. The staples of the government emergency food distribution were whatever could be found in local warehouses. Our immediate neighborhood suffered many losses. The Hunt's little girl died of pneumonia. The Heilman family died of poisoning from a camping stove used to heat their sleeping area. The house at the end of the block burned down one afternoon, and I always wondered if the couple truly went back just to rescue their pets. We didn't have the tools or experience necessary to live that way, but we did survive. Life played cruel jokes on the unassuming. Thank you.
So you mentioned your day job.
Yes.
And I've got a question about that. Now, when your coworkers ask you what you did over the weekend, and you're like, oh, I just won this prestigious literary award. Like, are they like, well, fine, don't tell me, or do they believe you?
They believe you because you bring the book in, you know, and people know you're struggling to get published or whatever. Otherwise, I do freelance writing, so it could be speech writing, that kind of stuff.
So you got supportive coworkers.
Yeah.
Awesome, great. And your books are
Back there. Thank you.
Thank you.